On. Hang on. Okay, thank you very much. Following the first session, which is the introduction to satellites and how to operate them, we'll go a little bit the other way now. Noel's going to give a talk, as you can see up there, on the Goonhilly project in Cornwall. Right, over to you then.
All right, yeah, so we're going from
You got that one?
Yep. So we're going from an Arrow handheld to a 32-meter dish. And we were just discussing the gain we're talking about on the bands I'll be talking about, and it's something in the order of about 65 dB. Hence the subtitle, this is real big boys' toys. So a group of us were very fortunate this year to have access to what you see there, which is GHY6. And to put this picture into perspective, that is a 2-story building. So if somebody was standing in front of it, you know, he'd come to about there. So it really is a monstrosity, and it was a golden opportunity to be able to play. So I want to talk a little bit about Goonhilly. There's a lot of folklore surrounding Goonhilly. A lot of people think because there's been a lack of information, there's a lot of mystique over what's happening down there at the moment. Talk about the more recent history and the amateur radio connection, which of course AMSAT plays a major part in how we came to be down there. Talk about the EME activity weekend, which we did back in August, and then touch a little bit on the possible future of the Goonhilly relationship. So a lot of people that you talk to say, I went to Goonhilly, we went to the visitor centre, my dad took me there, or we took the kids there, and we went there and we saw Arthur, and we went on the bus trip around the site, and it's got real recognition. And of course it was the original UK satellite Earth station. It was, if you read the Historic England listing, or what used to be known as English Heritage listing, they say it was the birthplace of satellite communication. That's probably over-egging it slightly, but certainly it was a very, very important place. The first antenna was the antenna that you may know as Arthur, which is also called GHY1. And there's a picture of it when it was built in 1962. And its claim to fame, of course, was that it received the first transatlantic television transmissions from Telstar. By 2004, BT had built the site up, and there were 64 antennas on the site, and at that time it was the largest teleport in the world. But BT, being the sort of the corporate giant they are, were always reviewing their investments, and decided in 2006 that they would scale down Goonhilly, because one thing that you find if you ever get involved in Goonhilly, and Chris said it to me about 5 minutes ago, it's a bloody long way from nowhere. It really is a long way from anywhere. And so BT scaled down activities, potentially that was one of the reasons, and they transferred them to their other Earth station in Madley in Herefordshire, of which they still operate today. And actually they have got, I think it's 3 of the types of dishes that GHY6 is, which we'll be talking about, the 32 metre. And the one thing, if you look on the web, the one thing that people were surprised about was, as part of that scaling back, they actually closed the visitor centre at about 2 weeks' notice in 2010. And basically the visitor centre was just shut down. It was mothballed, and it's just like the Mary Celeste. We actually, when we were down there in August, got a trip around the visitor centre, and it was just as if they closed it yesterday. There are even plates still stacked in the kitchen. That's how it is. All of the displays are still there. It's just bizarre. But anyway, BT took the corporate decision that they were pulling out of Goonhilly, and so by 2010, really the whole operation had wound down. It was being mothballed. And don't forget, this site sits on the Lizard Peninsula, which is a pretty hostile environment to any metal and wood, and so over time things did get worse. Eventually it was sold on a long peppercorn lease to its current owners, who are GES, or Goonhilly Earth Station. BT still have a presence there because it is a landing site for submarine cables. So there is still a small BT presence there, but it's the major site is owned by Goonhilly Earth Station. And they are a group of satellite engineers backed by investors, and they're building the site back up. Most of the dishes are now back in normal sort of telecoms traffic, or they're specialising a lot in satellite telecommand, so telecommand and monitoring. So for a satellite operator, doing the services uplink is one thing, but they also need command and control of the satellite, and Goonhilly are specialising in that area, and they're utilising a lot of the small dishes they've got there. The 9, 10, 12, 14 metre dishes are being used for that, and they're installing new dishes down there. If you remember, the BBC moved out of Television Centre a couple of years ago. Some of you may have saw that it was an auction on the web where all of the satellite farm from Television Centre was available. Goonhilly bought all of the dishes, and they're now installing those dishes. And if you follow Goonhilly's tweets, you'll see that they are in the process. They've just installed a new 16 metre. So the whole site is coming back to life gradually. They're also very keen on developing Cornwall as an industry, but also the space industry in Cornwall. There is a significant momentum behind a bid to put Newquay Airport back on the map, as if we have a spaceport in the UK, as being the spaceport would be at Newquay Airport. Newquay Airport used to be an RAF base. St Morgan's, thank you. I knew somebody would tell me. Pretty big site. And actually the thrust team were down there testing the engines down at Newquay. And that's all part of this momentum to drive Cornwall's industry, and in particular space industry, of which Goonhilly are a major part. And the visitor centre we'll touch more on a little bit, but there is a desire to reopen it, but it's not considered to be their core business. You know, their investors are investing in them to build a satellite business back up. So we'll touch on that again shortly. So amateur radio at Goonhilly, how did this happen? Well, it was actually down to Jim and Graham. I don't know if either of them are in the room, but certainly Jim and Graham at some point in going to conferences or networking met a guy called Ian Jones, who is the Goonhilly CEO, and I think in Graham's normal cheeky fashion he said, "Oh, could I put a FunCube ground station down there?" And Ian said, "Yes, why not?" So there is actually a FunCube ground station operating, collecting data into the data store, data warehouse down at Goonhilly. And as part of that, and then Graham developed the conversation, and Goonhilly, as part of their STEM outreach and building their publicity, they were very interested in being part of the Tim Beak project. And so it was all a case of all other things falling in line, because there happened to be down at Goonhilly GHY99, which is get this, it's a small dish, it's only 3.8 metres, but it is LEO capable, low Earth orbit tracking capable, and that's very unusual. They're few and far between, but it is capable of tracking low Earth orbit. But even better than that, it actually has got, it's the only dish at Goonhilly that has got an S-band feed. So it was ideal to receive the ham TV transmissions from the ISS. And so we did that, and I've got another slide on that, but through that relationship I also met the Goonhilly team, and we talked a bit more about what else we could do. So 99 is compatible, is a capable LEO 3.8 metre dish. It's owned by Satellite Catapult, who are the government business initiative to promote space and space industries in the UK. So it's owned by them, but it's located at Goonhilly. So as I say, it's the only dish at Goonhilly with an S-band feed. And I don't know if any of you have tried to measure sun noise and stuff at home. You know, we easily saw 10 dB of sun noise on this dish when we commissioned it to do the ham TV system. So it worked tremendously well. It was made available for Principium mission. On every mission, on every school's contact that there was video, we used GHY99 to get the TV pictures. Yeah, we've done occasional use since, but we have to ask on an ad hoc basis, and if it's not being used for other things, we do get pictures from it. Essentially what we did on 99 was it got the S-band feed. We put a DB6NT L-band down converter actually at the masthead. This picture is actually, I didn't realise it, but this picture is before it was fitted. So it's a DB6NT down converter at the masthead that goes off into the shed, and we run this wonderful French software that you may have heard the Ham TV boys talk about called Mini Tuner. And that then we take the digital bit stream that is produced from Mini Tuner of the video, and we send that over the network, and we sent it to the various schools that we were at. So we always had this down at Goonhilly tracking the ISS. We took majority of pictures from it, and it was all backhauled over the internet. But this was all done with Goonhilly and satellite Catapult support. So and if you want to see more, there was a TX Factor film done about that. I think it's TX Factor 10, I think, and then TX Factor 11 was the Ottery St Mary contact. As a result of that, I was down there. I've got about as much neck as this guy, so I said, there's some very big dishes over there, we'd like to play with those as well. And so as a result of that, things developed. So there are 3 large dishes down at Goonhilly. They were all built when satellites were deaf. I mean, why ever do you need a dish that size to communicate with satellites? Well, the truth of the matter is you don't anymore. There's three remaining. There were 4 GHY2, but I think that was nicknamed Guinevere, but that was demolished. But the 3 that are remaining were built, actually, one was built in the 60s, one was built in the 70s, and one was built in the 80s. And so Arthur, which is the one that you may remember, if you went to the visitor centre, you would actually have driven around the bottom or even walked inside and seen the drivetrain. That is grade 2 English heritage, or historic England as they're now called, listed. And it has moved again. So Goonhilly have done some work on it. It has moved. It is in need of refurbishment though, before it does much more. GHY3 is this one. I think, it's 29 metre. That was built in the 1970s and is not in use. It does require significant investment. I'll come back to that. Goonhilly 6, which is the one we played with, is built in 1984, is the biggest dish down there, 32 metres. Currently, it is fully operational, but currently decommissioned. And the reason why I put a smiley face by that is because that gave us an opportunity to go out and play. So it's been taken out of telecoms traffic. It's being rebuilt for deep space communications. So they're going to be tendering for Mars and lunar mission communications with this dish. By the end of the year it will be rebuilt for that, but there was a window of opportunity where it was no longer in use for commercial purposes and that's the reason why we were given the opportunity to play with it. GHY6 will at some point in the 3, will at some point, if they're successful with 6 in a commercial sense doing the Deep Space Network, they will then recommission 3 to go into deep space as well. So there are plans for all 3 dishes. 410 tons. They're the frequencies we were mentioning. 3.6 to 4.2 receive, 5.8 to 6.4, 11.7 to 10.7 to 11.7, and 14 gig transmit. The reason why I've starred the 2 top bands is because they're where we were operating over the weekends. You'll notice that the 3.6 gig is slightly out of the amateur band, which is at 3.4 gigahertz. And for that reason, our performance on 3.4 wasn't as good as it was on 5.7, which was much nearer the design frequency. How it works is it's what they call a Cassegrain feed, so the reflector in front of the dish. And then if you looked, I really should have put this picture in. If you look here, there's the Cassegrain reflector. There's a hole in the back of the dish. And again, to give you an idea of scale, that hole there, you could drive an old style Mini through it. That's the size of that. So what happens is the feed up and the receive down come off the Cassegrain down through the hole in the back of the dish into this, basically a tunnel or a mirror feed. So this very large tube you can see coming down out of the back of the dish is actually where the feed comes through. And it goes through a series of literally mirrors to get round the corners, through, down, and ends up in this column in the control room. And there are then a series of feeds or probes into it which give you the different frequency bands that you can operate. So the actual tunnel feed itself is not frequency selective. They believe that it would probably run down at UHF, but the actual frequency of operation is determined by the probes into the tunnel feed. But the great thing about that, of course, is this is waveguide that we can just connect directly to. And so in the control room, we just took off these waveguide feeds and connected SMA and N-type adapters, and we were into the waveguide. The actual beam waveguide, as I say, the bends are done on a mirror basis. It's interesting, there was some debate, we're not quite sure exactly how they work, but we believe there must be some form of diachroic mirrors which are frequency selective. So the first mirror here is the low band feed, but it passes the mid band and the high band frequencies down to other feeds. If anybody knows more, we'd be very interested. But it's a very interesting technique that they use. As I said, 410 tons. This is one of 4 motors that drive it round on a bed on the top of the 2-story building. The elevation control is up there, you can see the worm gear, and it's a positioning system rather than a tracking system. You guys, the satellite guys, will know exactly what I mean. You tell it to go to there, and that's it. It won't, natively it won't track, but Goonhilly actually, for our experiments, actually wrote some software so it did actually track the moon. So, but natively it really is a point and shoot type technology. The RF guys amongst you will appreciate this. That's a 3 kilowatt 5.6 gig PA, and the scary thing is actually the spare was here, so there are actually 4 of them. So horizontal, vertical, 3 kilowatt 5.6 gig PAs, and that's That's what a 3 kilowatt twit looks like. Huge. So we went down, Goonhilly said, well, you can come down and have a play, but what we'd really like you to do is see something new, something different. I wonder if you could do TV Moonbounce. So we're up for a challenge, so we thought, yeah, this would be good for a laugh. So we did down there. The path for EME is about 280 dB, minus 280 dB. Normal EME mode, of course, is CW, or if you're lucky, JT65. SSB for the normal station isn't really considered practical. But we were thinking, hang on, we want to do DVB-S, and that would be 10 times or 100 times wider than SSB in a 2.5 kilohertz bandwidth. And if we wanted to do different modes, you know, it's 1,000 times weaker. So actually, when we went down there, we knew we were probably pushing our luck. So we did a series of tests. We did echo tests with narrowband once we got the equipment up and running, and then we did some automated TV tests. Unfortunately, we took every mode possible. First of all, we took AM, FM, DVB-T, which is the multi-carrier OFDM, but also narrowband DVB-S. We tried the AM to begin with, and to be honest, we weren't getting the results we envisaged. It just wasn't loud enough to go any further. This is a waterfall. That's our transmission. That's the reflection off the moon. It really wasn't that loud enough. But the other thing that really perturbed us, and we knew it would happen, was it's a non-coherent reflector. The moon is not flat. No matter what you think, you know, nobody has been up there and polished it. So the phase distortion you get off a signal off the moon is significant. And I'll play a clip of FM. I think is Neil LDR in the room. Yes, you will now hear Neil's voice doing some FM tests on 5.6 gigs, and you'll notice it's fully quietening. But when he talks, it's very, very raspy. It sounds almost auroral, and that's because it's got the same characteristics. It's a non-coherent reflector. And for what we were trying to do with TV, yeah, it was a bit off the wall, really. So we'll just have a quick listen to Neil doing some FM tests. That's him transmitting.
Golf Bravo 6, Golf Hotel Yankee. Golf Bravo 6, Golf Hotel Yankee.
It sounds very edgy. It's not clean.
Golf Bravo 6, Golf Hotel Yankee FM.
But that's off the moon. It's only been 500,000 miles.
Golf Bravo 6, Golf Hotel Yankee FM.
So essentially, we abandoned the TV tests, I'm afraid to say. I think we knew we were pushing our luck. So, but as a result of that work and something else that happened, we were offered the chance to do an EME activity weekend. So Brian G4NNS, who is one of the Moonbounce Kings, really promoted this and helped us and guided us as to what we should do. And we went down for the weekend. Neil, myself, Tim, G4LOH, who's speaking in the VHF stream at the moment, and Brian, we all went down and we worked 50 plus stations on 3.4 and 5.6 gigs. If you want to see more of what we did, TX Factor 17, the most recent TX Factor 17 had a fantastic article on it, and at the end of it there's a bit of a surprise, and I've been asked, was that genuine? And it absolutely was genuine, wasn't it, Neil? Yeah. So all weekend we'd been working 50 or 60 people off the moon. The guy from TX Factor, Bob, sits down in the chair and says, "Can I have a go?" And we say, "Yeah, why not? Use your own call sign." Yes, okay. So he put a CQ call out to the moon. Well, you don't call CQ off the moon. And he did it a second time, and an SM7 came back. Never happens. Anyway, this is what our own echoes sounded like off the moon. That's us sending. That's loud. Okay, so I'm told, and Neil will re-emphasise this, that is a loud signal off the moon. Yeah. Interestingly, we weren't as loud with everybody, and we thought about this for a while and realised that there was a big dish, little dish effect. If you think about it, because we were running such a big dish with 65 dB of gain, our actual beam width, we were only illuminating part of the moon. A lot of stations with smaller dishes actually over-illuminate the moon, so that's inefficient. But it is possible, when you look at this effect, it is possible that two big stations could be off the moon and miss each other if they're illuminating a different part of the moon. But we weren't as strong with some stations as we thought we should be, and that's because they're listening to the whole of the moon and we were only illuminating part of it. Just an interesting effect. We didn't always get the results that we thought we should. And certainly on 3.4, the results weren't great because of the mismatch on the feed. In fact, on 3.4, I know Carlos is here, but this is true, we were only running 50 watts into the aerial. And we ran 50 watts into the aerial, but we saw 4 watts coming back down the receive port and 4 watts on the other polarizer. 4 watts return loss on the transmit port and 4 watts on the other circular port coming back. So we were losing at least 8 watts because we were out of frequency. So what you were hearing there was probably, I would think we were managing about 25 watts by the time it got to the top of the tunnel. But if you do 25 watts plus 65 dB, we did do some SSB. Most of it was this very strange mode that I don't understand, banging bits of metal together. This was Peter G3 LTF he's got a 6 metre dish in his garden, and this was him on sideband.
Anyway, we're working on sideband. Thanks for the Kyoto. Let's just try and run up a few more. I'm Journey home. 7-3. North Bravo 6 Golf 3 Yankee Golf 3 Lima Tango Fox. Over.
So we're trying to get it.
Quiet.
That was our reflection.
Okay, Jim, yes, fine. Thanks very much indeed. It's all good. And good luck with Bruce. I'm sure you'll make it with him okay. All right, well, probably, I think there's somebody else on CW, so maybe you've got some others to work yet. GB6GH1G3LTS.
So that was a phenomenal weekend. But we not only did amateur radio Moonbounce, Brian in particular was very keen, and also Goonhilly were keen to do some astronomy, because I'm certainly not the expert on this, but looking at certain objects, you can get a much better idea of the calibration of the dish because they're known sources. So the first thing we did was look at the sun noise. And on 6 centimetres, I have 5.6 gigs, we got 20.5 dB of sun noise, predicted to be 23, but we put that down to the feeder loss. So 20 dB of sun noise is pretty awesome. And then the other thing we did was look at Taurus A. Now, because we weren't really capable of tracking, what we did, we parked the dish at a point where we knew Taurus A was going to be, and as it's tempting to say as it drifted in, but no, actually we drifted towards it. And so what you're seeing here is Taurus A as the Earth drifts, as it drifts through the focus and then out of the dish. And That was 1.7 dB of noise from Taurus A. So I'm told that's pretty much what they would have expected. And Goonhilly in particular were pleased with that result because it told them quite significantly about the dish.
How far away is that from? 6,500 light years.
So, you know, it was a tremendous weekend. And I mean, you know, 6,000. I thought when I saw Stereo A, which is the orbiter around the sun at Bochum, I thought that was pretty special. I forget how many kilometres away that is, at 93 or whatever, 93 million miles to the sun? Yeah. I thought that was pretty special, but I mean, this is light years away. It's tremendous. Okay, so, you know, what next? Well, Goonhilly are very interested in future cooperation. We've still got GHY99 down there. Graham's Fun Cube station is still down there. There could be an opportunity to be involved in the restoration of Arthur, which could be funded by reopening the visitor centre, and we're in discussions with Goonhilly around that. There's nothing decided yet. We had hoped in some respects to be able to come to the conference and talk a little bit more about this, but we are talking about whether we could have, whether there's any way we could get full-term access to Arthur through doing something around a charitable trust, but there's nothing set in stone yet. It would be a fantastic opportunity both to preserve, you know, a piece of our UK technology history, have access to that dish, but also set the visitor centre up as a STEM outreach centre to try and inspire future generations of technologists, engineers, scientists in what we all know, you know, is the best hobby ever. So if you're interested in being involved in that, you know, talk to probably Graham or myself. Nothing's firm, nothing set in concrete, but you know, there is a potential of that could happen in the future. So there we go. Thank you very much. That's it. Any questions? Any questions?
Chris, can you run around?
Thank you very much. Is it working? Oh yes. A few years ago, in the radio astronomy group of the BAA, we were talking to Goonhilly about trying to set up a permanent internet-enabled radio astronomy station, but that seems to have all fallen through. And they were also linking up with Jodrell Bank as part of an interferometer system.
Yeah.
Is that happening? It all seems to be a bit vague what goes on.
Yeah, I knew about the astronomy contact because I know Paul Hyde very well. That if anything was to happen with Arthur, astronomy would be a major part of that, and so I think that's the route to ensuring that to happen. Arthur currently is nominally tied into the E-Merlin project, which is the University Jodrell Bank project, and all of that needs to be formalised, and that's one of the reasons why we're just saying there is a potential to do something. We're talking to Goonhilly to try and sort out what it could be, but if something did happen, Brian G4NNS will absolutely make sure that astronomy is part of it as well as amateur radio. So yeah.
Thank you. Do we have a next question? You're all gobsmacked, aren't you? No? Well, thank you very much, Noel. That's a very interesting
Thank
talk.
you.
We're going to break for lunch now. When we come back, the next talk is due here at 13:45.